Okay, so sit rep. Let me walk you through some of the stages of this process so far in removing the crossbar up front, etc. I started it with a Sawzall, just kept the blade flat, and as soon as I got a deep enough cut, I just finished it off with a handsaw just to, avoid gouging anything. The only issue that I ran into with fitment of the cage is obviously these two bottom screws. If I move this trim piece out of the way, you can see this is what you're going to hit. And what I should have done is I took a little bit too much material off of these. I could have left a little bit more on there, and it really wouldn't have made, it wouldn't have affected this whole thing all that much. So it just kind of is what it is. It sets in there nice now, and it sits flush, and I've already test fitted that this trim piece will fit on there and look good, and that the head unit will in fact slide in. The head unit itself will sit above these screws, so it's really just clearancing the cage so that it will sit above and around those screws. Other than that, I haven't had to make any other modifications. There's been no cutting to any of the rest of this, and whenever we install the original Blaupunk back in, when the car undergoes a full factory restoration at some point in its life, it's just a matter of replacing this center console piece. So really not a big deal. Wiring. While I'm here, let's talk about the wiring. This is the main factory plug for the Porsche, and thankfully Mike, the previous owner of this car, used an adapter kit, so he hasn't cut any of the factory wiring. I'm not sure what some of the rest of this shenanigans are. I assume that's from the original owners, because there was an aftermarket head unit in here. But long story short, the actual speaker plugs look like this for the 944, at least for the later cars. And so front right, front left, rear right, rear left, etc. all have these plugs. Now, I'm not sure if someone has been in here in the past and messed with things. As far as I can tell, this all looks factory. There doesn't appear to be any necessity to run another two connections for the rear speakers. The Blaupunk that was previously in here was only connected to these two plugs, which control the front right and front left speakers, and I had audio coming from all four. So what I'm assuming Porsche did is they just tied in the rear speakers to the fronts, and that's it. And I'm not sure if everything is controlled through the balance control, but this balance fader worked, and the balance fader on the head unit itself worked. So we'll see what happens when the Kenwood goes in, but for right now, that's just all you really need to know about the wiring. So let's go take a look at the harness real fast, and I'll walk you through that. Let's take a look at everything we've got on the bench here. This is the head unit itself, obviously. This piece of kit is the GPS antenna that's supposed to help in the navigation, with the navigation accuracy for Apple CarPlay. This is the harness that plugs into the head unit, and this is the Porsche adapter. So this will just plug into the factory plug back there that I just showed you in the last clip. And then these, as I was mentioning before, these are the plugs for, or adapters in this case, for those front speaker wires. And so this is what's actually going to provide our sound for us. You can look up the head unit itself if you want to learn more about the actual capabilities and functionality of it. Long story short, what you need to know, the reason why I purchased this unit was A, it's a shallow mount. B, although it is capacitive touch, so a few of you might not like that, the buttons are on the sides here, facing towards the driver. I didn't want anything on the bottom just because I figured it was going to be kind of annoying with the gear shift in the way. What we really cared about with this was wireless Apple CarPlay, so that I wouldn't have to plug in a lightning charger every single time I got in the car. I hate that. And the big thing here is this micro HDMI. So as I go through and wire this up, I'm actually going to include a couple extra steps that a lot of you probably won't do. But should you choose to do this in the future, at least there's some footage or some documentation of it. Basically what I'm going to do is just branch off the switched ignition, and I'm going to make an extra lead from the ground so that I have switch ignition and ground, and I'm going to run a small power block, probably, at least at this point in time in my thinking, exactly the power blocks that I used for the dash cameras. So if you haven't seen those videos, it's just one of those little power blocks with a car charger and a couple USB ports, and you can plug into that. I'm gonna hide one of those under the dash up front. That way I don't have to run anything to the rear of the car. And that will allow me the power capability to plug into a micro PC that will also be tucked under the dash. So you'll have the OBD port for the Focus OBD. You'll have that being plugged into the a miniature PC under the dashboard that will be running the Focus OBD software, and then that will be plugged into this power block, and that's how that will get power. So once we set up this micro HDMI, we'll have to do a little bit of a parking wire bypass there so that we can have full access to the media capabilities. We'll be able to switch over to HDMI mode, and we should theoretically have a fully functioning PC within the car. And in that case, we can open up the OBD software, and we'll have onboard diagnostics in the vehicle at all times as soon as you switch the ignition on. So that will be really nice to have, and that's sort of the whole logic behind a lot of this, on top of just the usability and functionality of Apple CarPlay. Because as much as I love the Blaupunkt and how it matched the car aesthetically, when people would call me, or back and forth trying to set up calls or whatever while driving, it's kind of frustrating. So having something like this, I think, is going to be really helpful. And like I said, just to appease all the purists out there, don't worry. There is an original Blaupunkt, I believe Reno, that will eventually go back in the car when the time comes. Briefly, I just wanted to explain one last time how everything gets connected, specifically with the 944, because everything from this point forward is just a full-blown standard radio install. Everything is color-coded the same between all manufacturers and all that stuff, so it makes things super easy. That's the purpose of getting the adapter kit. So the adapter kit is what you want to solder to so that you don't cut the factory harness. That way, that's the whole point of having the adapter, and that's why it's worth it. That way, if you ever want to take anything out, you're not messing with anything that's factory or stock. You can just plug the original stuff back in, not go hacking in there and try to work within the car. So everything that you do is going to be outside of the car, and when you're done connecting your wires, then you just plug it in, test it, and it should work. So briefly, I'm just going to cover that real fast here. Yellow is going to be the 12-volt switched ignition. Red is your constant hot. Black is ground. Blue is your power antenna wire. And typically orange, or orange with white, will be the illumination wire. Again, this will go, the 944 is not going to have an illumination wire, so there's no real point to using that. This will go to the factory plug, and then, as I showed you earlier, this is what you will connect to however the harness looks for whatever radio you get. So the plugs for the actual radios are what are proprietary to the manufacturers, and that's what you'll connect up. And it's the same deal with the speaker wire. The colors are all typically the same. You'll have an adapter. In the 944, you saw it was those weird sort of plugs. In that case, you really only have to connect two. You'll just connect the two white wires, the white with black and the white, and the gray and the gray with black. That's really all you need to do as far as later car goes, so long as someone hasn't poked around in there. Again, I'm not sure if things change between speaker packages. There's the 10 speaker options and all that other kind of stuff. If you just got the basic 4-speaker setup, this is how my install personally went, and so I figured this would be a good baseline to discuss. I was going back and forth on giving you guys a whole soldering tutorial as part of all this, but I figured this video is going to be long enough and I don't really need to clutter it with extra information. What you're really probably looking for is just color of the wires and how to connect it. So that's really all there is to say on that.